Hey, and welcome. Low self-esteem is often talked about as a lack of confidence or self-love, but from a psychological perspective, it is something deeper and more structural. This video explores low self-esteem through a psychological lens, not as a personality flaw, but as a learned internal system shaped by early experiences, relationships, and patterns of self-evaluation. Rather than offering motivation or quick fixes, this explanation looks at what low self-esteem actually is, how it develops over time, why reassurance often doesn't work, and how low self-esteem quietly shapes thoughts, behavior, and relationships. If you struggle with chronic self-doubt, harsh self-criticism, people-pleasing, or feeling not enough even when things go well, this video is meant to help you understand the mechanism behind it, calmly, clearly, and without judgment. Understanding comes before change. Chapter 1: What low self-esteem actually is. Low self-esteem is often misunderstood as simply not liking yourself, but psychologically, it is something more precise and more structural. Low self-esteem is not a mood. It is not a temporary lack of confidence, and it is not the same as humility or self-criticism. At its core, low self-esteem is a persistent internal evaluation of the self as deficient, inadequate, or fundamentally less worthy than others. This evaluation is not always conscious. In fact, many people with low self-esteem appear functional, competent, even confident on the surface. What defines low self-esteem is not how someone performs, but how they internally explain their performance. Success is often attributed to luck, external help, or lowered standards. Failure is attributed to personal flaw. Psychologically, this creates an asymmetric self-model. Positive outcomes don't count as evidence of worth. Negative outcomes are treated as confirmation of defectiveness. Low self-esteem is therefore not a lack of self-knowledge, but a biased interpretive system. It filters experience in a way that protects a negative self-concept from being challenged. This is why reassurance rarely works. Compliments are discounted. Affection feels conditional. Validation feels temporary or suspicious. The mind is not asking, "Am I okay?" It is already convinced that the answer is no, and everything else is interpreted through that assumption. Chapter 2: How low self-esteem develops. Low self-esteem does not usually emerge from a single traumatic event. More often, it develops gradually through repeated relational experiences that shape how a person learns to evaluate themselves. One of the most important factors is conditional acceptance. When care, attention, or safety are experienced as dependent on performance, behavior, or emotional compliance, the child learns an implicit rule: I am acceptable when I function correctly. This creates an early distinction between the self as experienced, the self as acceptable. Over time, the unacceptable parts are suppressed, hidden, or attacked internally. This process does not require abuse or neglect in the extreme sense. It can arise in well-meaning environments that emphasize achievement over presence, emotional control over emotional understanding, comparison over attunement. Another major contributor is inconsistent mirroring. When a child's inner experience is frequently misunderstood, dismissed, or reinterpreted, they may learn that their perception is unreliable. This leads to chronic self-doubt, dependence on external feedback, difficulty trusting internal signals. Later in life, this often appears as indecisiveness, people-pleasing fear of being wrong. Low self-esteem can also develop through role fixation. When a person is valued primarily for a function, being the responsible one, the calm one, the successful one, their worth becomes tied to maintaining that role. Any deviation feels dangerous. Importantly, none of this requires conscious belief. Low self-esteem operates largely at the implicit level, felt assumptions rather than articulated thoughts. Chapter 3: The Inner Mechanics. How low self-esteem sustains itself. Once established, low self-esteem tends to maintain itself through several psychological mechanisms. One of the most central is the inner critic, The inner critic is not simply negative self-talk. It is a regulatory system designed to prevent rejection, failure, or humiliation. From a psychological perspective, the inner critic functions as a protective strategy. If I attack myself first, I might avoid being attacked from the outside. This is why the inner critic often intensifies before social exposure, evaluation, intimacy, rest. Its goal is not accuracy. Its goal is control. Another sustaining mechanism is a selective attention. People with low self-esteem are more likely to notice cues of disapproval, remember failures more vividly, overestimate others' confidence and certainty. At the same time, they underregister acceptance, neutrality, quiet appreciation. This creates a distorted social reality where the self always appears as the weakest element in the room. There is also a strong tendency towards self-verification. Psychologically, the mind prefers consistency over positivity. A negative self-concept, once formed, feels familiar, even if painful. Situations that challenge this self-concept can provoke anxiety rather than relief. This is why people with low self-esteem may sabotage positive relationships, distrust, kindness, feel uncomfortable when things go well. The system is not trying to make the person unhappy, it is trying to maintain coherence. Chapter 4: How Low Self-Esteem Shapes Behavior and Relationships. Low self-esteem does not stay internal. It quietly shapes behavior, choices, and relationships, often in ways that reinforce the original belief. One common pattern is over-adaptation. The person becomes highly attuned to others' needs, moods, and expectations. This can look like empathy or generosity, but internally it is driven by fear of rejection, fear of being a burden, fear of being exposed as inadequate. Boundaries become difficult because saying no feels like risking worth. Another pattern is avoidance. Avoidance does not always look passive. It can appear as procrastination, perfectionism, emotional withdrawal, chronic self-distraction. The underlying logic is the same. If I don't fully engage, I can't fully fail. In relationships, low self-esteem often creates an unstable dynamic. The person may oscillate between craving closeness, fearing dependency. They may seek reassurance but feel ashamed for needing it. They may tolerate relationships that confirm their low self-view because those relationships feel psychologically familiar. Importantly, low self-esteem does not mean low standards. Many people with low self-esteem have very high internal standards, but apply them exclusively to themselves. This imbalance is deeply exhausting. Chapter 5: Psychological Change: What Actually Helps. Improving low self-esteem is not about replacing negative thoughts with positive ones. That approach often fails because it targets content rather than structure. What helps is changing the relationship to self-evaluation itself. One key element is decentering from the inner critic. This does not mean silencing it or arguing with it. It means recognizing it as a protective mechanism rather than an authority. When the critic is seen as a response to fear rather than truth, its grip weakens. Another important shift is building tolerance for imperfection. Low self-esteem is maintained by the belief that mistakes reveal essence. Psychological change involves learning that error is information, discomfort is survivable, worth is not contingent on performance. This learning does not happen through insight alone. It happens through repeated experiences of staying present after failure, remaining connected, while imperfect, allowing discomfort without immediate self-punishment. Relational experiences are especially powerful. Being seen without being corrected, being valued without being optimized, being allowed to exist without justification. Over time, these experiences create a new internal reference point. Not "I am good," but "I am allowed to be." This shift is subtle but profound. Low self-esteem does not disappear suddenly, but it becomes less convincing, less dominant, less central, and slowly the self no longer needs to be defended or proven. It can simply be lived with. Are there specific topics you're interested in or a particular question you'd like answered in your life? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe now and join me on your journey toward more clarity and inner strength.